Hi guys, today is March 10th in Japan. That means tomorrow is March 11th, 2021, which is going to be the 10th anniversary since the earthquake and tsunami and nuclear disaster happened in northern Japan. Gosh, 10 years ago now. It's crazy to think that it's been that long. And I've been wanting to kind of share some of our stories that we have working on relief back when we did, and just talking to people who had firsthand experience going through this crazy tragic thing. Now we weren't in Japan in 2011 for the earthquake, but you went to Japan like 4 months after it for aid and relief and stuff, and then my first time in Japan was in 2014, so 3 years after, and we both went to the area where the epicenter was, basically in Miyagi, Ishinomaki, Sendai, all of those areas, Kisanuma, and stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about those experiences. On March 11th, 2011, how did you first hear about the earthquake, and like what were your feelings on it when you first heard about it?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of things popping up on the internet, and I was pretty kind of devastated, heartbroken, because at that point I had already been interested in moving to Japan. I knew it was something I wanted to do for my future. Just that year I had switched majors from English to teaching English as a second language.
Right, you were in college at this time.
Right.
I was still in high school, so like at this time we hadn't met yet.
Right.
At this time. But you were already, it was weird, like I was interested in Japan before I even met you, and then you were interested before, so it just worked out when we met. Anyway.
Yeah, so when I found out about this, I wanted to do something to help, and if possible I wanted to actually go, because I heard the Japanese government was asking for volunteers and asking for relief agencies to come in, do humanitarian work, help clean up from the disaster, because it was more than they could handle. And so I started looking around for one, and I actually found an organization that apparently had originally had like more of a touristy trip planned, but then after March 11th they canceled the original plan and restructured to be a humanitarian
like we
relief
gotta go
effort.
to Tohoku, we gotta at least people.
And so I applied for that, and there was only by the time I found this, I guess March, April, May. I guess by the time I finally found this, and it was May, and we were leaving. We would have been leaving that next month. I had about 1 month.
Right. Did you leave in June or July?
June.
Wow. So let's see, March, April, May, June. I mean, it was like 3 months.
Yeah, it was about halfway between June and July.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I was I was there for 1 month, give or take.
Right.
It was about 3.5 weeks, I think, that we were in Japan doing the relief effort.
So it's just interesting that like a lot of people's first time to Japan, sometimes it's for like a job, or usually it's for tourism. So you kind of got like a double, almost like culture shock experience, where you were going into Japan the first time and you went up to Miyagi and got to see like all of the, I'll get to what I saw, 3 years even later, but I can't imagine like what was it like in the like hardest hit places. I think Kisanuma, like what was it like, just 3 months after?
Yeah, our group, we had partnered with Samaritan's Purse and Crash Japan, and we were up in Kisanuma, Ishinomaki, around that area. Some of what I saw, the tsunami, what it left behind everywhere once the water receded, was this thick black sludge that just covered everything, filled everything, and it was some of the worst smelling things that you would ever imagine. Like, who knows, oil, feces, mud, dirt, everything, just all mixed together in this sludge.
So you had to like shovel it out of places, basically?
Exactly, yeah. We were shoveling out houses in areas that didn't get flattened.
Wow.
And then some of the Japanese crews were coming in to do pressure washing, and um, we helped tear down drywall that all had to be thrown away, but they were hoping to reuse the frames because a lot of the structures were sound. Just the materials were deteriorated or whatever,
Right.
destroyed by the tsunami water. There was a day where, while we were working there, a body was found.
Oh my god, wow. I didn't know that.
And yeah, so that was like none of the people who were in the group I came with had seen it. It was some of the Japanese workers who found the body.
Wow. It just goes to show how, like, even just 3 months after, there was still so much to be done, like, in every like messed up aspect of it, you know.
Yeah, in 3 or 4 months, like, that's just how long it took to get all the everything set up to start cleaning, basically. Wow. Yeah, they had to
do all this stuff.
Anyway.
So you went there like way like 3 to 4 months after the disaster. Did you ever get to like talk to anyone who experienced it firsthand or like had a story to tell or something?
Yeah, there were quite a few stories that we heard firsthand from people there.
What was like the craziest thing?
There was one man who just barely managed to survive by holding on to a bar in his house.
Right, because of the water.
From the water, yeah. Wow. With the water, he just barely was able to hold on and not get swept away by the tsunami.
Wow.
So he had just held on, and that was likely the only reason he survived. And there was another old woman who we spoke with who, her home was just high enough up on the mountain to where her house was mostly fine. Like, there was a lot of water damage, but like the second floor of the house was safe.
Right.
But she recounted like how terrifying it was and talked about and I mean, she had lost many friends and family members and things like that who had, at least at that time, there were still thousands of people not counted for.
Wow.
At that time, so
it's crazy that you got to hear these stories only 3 months after, because I feel like when you go through something like that, you need a lot more. You need time to like deal with those traumatic events, and like 3 months after is so fresh. It's crazy that people are willing to even like tell their stories after that. You know what I mean? And then like after we met after like a few months after you came back from your trip, and you were showing me pictures and stuff from Japan and stuff. And then we like, oh man, how did I hear about it? I was in high school at the time when I heard about it, and I felt very helpless because I was a high school student. Like, I couldn't just get up and go to Japan, and like, not to mention like the cost of going, and so I felt really helpless, and stuff. So the most that I could ever do was like donate to places, but even that didn't like really feel like it was enough. But at that time, I was like, I want to move to Japan, like, and I specifically wanted to go to Sendai and Miyagi, like really badly. Well, then, we got the chance to go again in 2014 through our college. Right. We went on like a cultural, and we went on a trip that was both like a cultural trip and then helping people. One of the main things we did on our trip is we went to Ishinomaki, Japan, to this oyster farmer's farm. I can't exactly remember the damage caused to his like oyster farm or whatever. Other than like he just really needed help cleaning up. So like, remember we were like scrubbing buoys and stuff? Yeah. That was such a fun day, honestly.
Yeah, that was really cool.
It was, but that day I remember, that was the first time, because we were staying in Sendai, which was hit hard, but not flattened, you know what I mean? But then when we went, like, one of my like the craziest memories about that 2014 trip is we were on a bus leaving Sendai City and we're going to Ishinomaki. And, we're like college students, we're messing around and stuff and giggling and having a good time. And like, the closer and closer you got to Ishinomaki, things started looking flatter is like the only way I know how to describe it. Like, it literally went from big city with skyscrapers to like you got homes, and then like it was almost like immediately you just saw foundations of houses everywhere, and like the only things that were new in those areas were like convenies that had like popped up for maybe for like workers or someone who like people who were cleaning up and stuff. And that was such a crazy memory. I remember being in that bus with like 12 other college students, and it's just like we went from messing around talking and stuff to like complete dead silence because we were just so, it hits you different when you see it in person. And I guess we went on that trip 3 years after the tsunami, and I guess I was just really surprised that it still looked like that 3 years after. Like it looked like it had just happened, like not 3 years after. And I think that just goes to show the scale of the damage and how they didn't have enough help at first, and which is why they brought in people from all around to help and stuff. And then I don't know, like my other memory from the 2014 trip was we were actually there in 2014 on March 11th.
Right.
So like actually right now as I'm sitting here, we were in Japan 7 years ago.
Yeah, it was the 3-year anniversary.
Yeah. So it was the 3-year anniversary of the earthquake, and we were not together at the time that this happened. Well, we were together like boyfriend girlfriend, but we were not physically like in the same place together at this time. But okay. Yeah, March 11th, I think it happened like I want to say like 2:35 or 2:45 or 3 o'clock or something. So I was in I don't know where you were. I think you were at a park actually with some kids, and I was in a kindergarten as like an English guest at an English speaking class for kindergartners. And so at the time that the earthquake had happened, like on like at 2:35 or whatever on March 11th, 2014, 3 years after, like a little like an alarm sounded, and a speaker came on. There are speakers all over Japan. If you don't know, it's part of like their emergency system. Like ours goes off all the time to talk about COVID numbers and stuff. So it went off, and it was like there's gonna be a moment of silence for like the 3 years of remembrance of the earthquake and the victims and stuff. And I was in a class of 5-year-olds who were a minute ago jumping off the walls, screaming, having a great time. And like the moment that happened, like they knew what was up. Even at like so young, 5 years old. I mean, these kids were 2 when it happened, and who knows what they remember from that time. But it's just, I don't know, something about the kids just suddenly becoming quiet and everything being so silent, like hit me so hard, like hit really hard. You know what I mean? So I'll never forget that. Especially because we were in Miyagi at that time. It's just really crazy. So that was a memory that really stuck out to me a lot. Was there anything else about the trip that we went on together, or was there anything that stuck out to you?
What was really interesting was there were a few areas we went through that were areas I had been to previously in 2011.
Oh, right. So you kind of got to see a little bit of the...
I got to see some of the progress, and some of those areas that once we were there in the 3 years later were completely flattened. Those were just rubble and debris as far as the eye can see before that.
Right.
And yeah, people just manually filling wheelbarrows and putting things in the backs of trucks, dragging the rubble away off. So it was kind of really cool to see that a lot of that debris had been cleaned up.
Yeah.
But then still kind of, humbling though, to realize that nothing could still yet be rebuilt. Yeah. People were still, there were still tens of thousands of people in, or it seemed like that, in temporary housing. And
which we went to temporary housing in 2014. A lot of it's, unfortunately, it's a lot of old people who got displaced from their homes and stuff. But I still remember when we went to Ishinomaki, in the 2014 trip, I've never seen piles of debris this big. I'm talking like huge tall buildings were like, there was like debris the same size. It was insane. And this is 3 years after. Like it almost felt like it had happened like a week ago. So that's why I was so shocked. But yeah, it's interesting that you maybe got to see some progress.
But that's just the
between
thing
two
is,
of them.
yeah, it's
not that
such
much.
a long process that,
Right.
like,
Or
even
rather-
today at the 10-year anniversary, there's still
Things
areas
to do.
where they haven't been able to rebuild. There's towns that are like empty because people haven't moved back,
Right.
or haven't been able to move back
Yeah.
because there's no infrastructure anymore.
Speaking of empty towns, well, let's kind of move forward to when we moved to the
that's
Sendai
fair.
area, actually, which is we moved to Sendai in 2018, so that was like 7 years after the disaster and stuff, and things look really a lot better from what I noticed.
Right.
We hadn't been to like the really hard hit areas, Ishinomaki, Kisanuma, and stuff like that, but it did look like things were more bustling.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Things are back to normal in the cities.
Somewhat, yeah, back to normal. Basically back to normal in the cities, but not in those little towns. But I do remember, like, earlier, like, last year, we were driving through, I've actually driven through one of the cities in Fukushima that got completely evacuated. Like, what's the town called? Is it Futaba town or something? Anyway, the town near, where the nuclear facility was, where they had to basically evacuate tens of thousands, probably 100,000 people from these cities, if not more, people from these cities that were close to the reactor. Well, we've driven through there, and they still have signs talking about, like, hey, if you're driving through here, there is radiation here. There's a reason why people can't move back yet. But last time we drove down there were new houses being built. Like, in there. Yeah, I know, it was so weird. But I guess maybe at this time it's gonna be a lot safer for people to live there. But that's all that there was. Like, there was either like super, super old houses or just brand spanking new, like just built this year houses. It was really weird.
Like, literally just built.
But still very empty.
In the
like,
process of being built.
Not like no malls or anything, pachinko parlor, nothing like that. Like, no one really wants to live there unless like maybe they grew up there, they have ties there and stuff.
Yeah, so I had read an article from one of the Japanese news companies talking about how they were trying to get a lot of the elderly people to move back, or a lot of the elderly people wanted to move back, at least, because they had memories and stuff there. It was where they grew up, it's all they'd known.
Yeah.
And also, radiation is mostly just a very long-term effect thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess part of the mentality was some of the elderly people were saying, well, we don't have too many decades left anyway, so it's not going to decrease our lifespan much if we move back. And so a lot of them were coming back to help get the soil ready for agriculture again and things like that, so that young people could move in again later once everything's, like, I guess, ready.
A little bit better.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'd heard anyway.
Right. So we worked in Miyagi, and so we've had coworkers that went through it, like, on that day.
Yeah.
But no one really opened up to me about it or talked about it, which honestly, like,
it's kind of taboo, I think.
It feels that way, and I think that's a big difference between Japanese people and American people too. Is like a lot of Americans who maybe went through like Hurricane Katrina, or even something as tragic as 9/11. I've heard a lot more people are just a lot more open to telling those stories. Whereas for Japanese people, on 3/11, they're a lot more quiet and reserved about it. As you said, it's kind of taboo. So I don't really hear about it now, which is why when we were in Japan and people would share their stories with us, like there was a guy who was telling us a story about how he was on his roof for like hours and hours and hours waiting for someone to rescue him. Those stories you won't really hear about as much anymore, I think, and you've got to build trust, I think, with people for them to even willing to be telling you those stories. So it felt really like, special is a weird word, but it did feel really special to like hear those stories from people who had experienced this stuff, because you just don't hear about it that much anymore. It just doesn't get talked about, So anyway, do you have any other, like, I don't know, anything else you want to say about it?
It's definitely still in people's memories, and even if it's not frequently talked about out loud, their own experiences and stuff like that in public. It's definitely talked about a lot in private still. And there was an earthquake we had, about a month ago?
Yeah.
That the biggest earthquake that's been in this area since
the
2011 one. And apparently, I'm not sure exactly how the science works, but it actually was determined to be an aftershock of that 2011
from 10 years ago
earthquake.
Yeah.
And that was, the news was just talking about that a lot. Or at least it seemed like I saw it a good bit.
Yeah. Which is crazy, because I know that a lot of people talk about how, like, you know, after going through something like that, you'll have PTSD that triggers through, you know, sudden earthquakes like that. I can only imagine, obviously, but, yeah, I guess the only other thing I want to talk about is how it's affected tourism to that area. And people, you know, we lived in Sendai, I lived in Miyagi, there's people who live in, Fukushima. I have a friend she used to live in Minamisoma, Fukushima, which she had to actually, like, man, in Fallout terms, it's like checking your rads, like, I don't know, like, to check your body for, like, any
residual radiation,
right, any radiation, and she has to send that number to the government, like, every once in a while. But other than that, she lived there fine, just safe and stuff. So, you know, but there are people who are scared to go up there, even for tourism, because they hear of all these earthquakes happening and they hear about the nuclear, so they stay away from it. So, like, northern Japan, like Tohoku, basically, like, a lot of people won't go there.
Yeah.
Which sucks, because Tohoku is still the prettiest place in Japan I've ever been to.
It's incredibly
There's
beautiful.
so much cool stuff, but it's just they've been struggling with their tourism department because no one wants to go there. And so if you guys have a chance to go to northern Japan, you should definitely go there. They do need help in terms of, like, you know, booming up their tourism again. And it's a place worth going, I think. Anyways, I think that's all I have to say about it, you know. I mean, it was just, I feel really lucky that we got to talk to, you know, elderly people who were so kind to share their stories about it, and I'm happy that we got to, you know, go help people in any way that we possibly could. But yeah, it's just like, it feels so weird that it was 10 years ago now, and I don't know, hopefully things can only get better for that area in terms of bringing in tourism again and rebuilding and stuff like that. So I don't know, anything else you want to say?
Nothing else I want to add, but
cool.
Thank you.
Alright, well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, it wasn't monetized. It just doesn't feel right to monetize a video like this, but I've been wanting to share our stories for a while about it, and our previous trips that had to do with coming to Sendai and Miyagi and tsunami cleanup and stuff.
I guess if any of you have any questions about what we experienced, either what I experienced in 2011 or what we both experienced in 2013, feel free to 14. Feel free to ask in the comments. I'll be watching them also and try to reply to any questions you have. So. Just
continue to, like, you know, if you're a prayer person, you know, do that. Miyagi always needs it and stuff like that, and the other, you know, people around who are affected and stuff. And there's also plenty of places you can donate with a simple Google search, and, like, there's always places on Twitter that are advertising, like, hey, we're raising money for these people who got displaced because of it. And I mean, even 10 years later, there's so much work to be done. So anyways, thanks for watching this video, and yeah, stay safe out there.